Hi everyone, Robert McClellan here. A quick video for students in ES110 to help you prepare for your lab assignment in which you consider what happens to toilet waste. As you can guess, I'm on a toilet right now. I'm not actually using it at the moment, but the reason I'm here is I want to talk about what happens when this toilet gets flushed. Where does the waste go? And the answer depends a lot on where the home is situated. So in this case, my home is in a city. So when I flush this toilet, the waste and the water goes down through a pipe into the basement of the house where it flows out to a main sewage pipe that runs under our street. From there, it goes out and hits a junction with an even larger sewage pipe that carries it down towards the Grand River, where there is a municipal wastewater treatment facility where the waste from my toilet is merged with the waste from toilets and drains all over the city, and it is treated through a variety of processes to remove as much of that waste as is practically possible before the remaining water is discharged into the Grand River, where it flows downstream towards Lake Erie. Now, if I was in a rural area, if this toilet was in a farmhouse, say, then it would be a little bit of a different system. There, what typically happens is the wastewater from the toilet goes down into a septic tank, which is a large tank underneath or near the house itself, and from there then there is an additional septic bed that the wastewater slowly trickles out into. It's essentially a series of buried pipes that releases the water gradually out into the ground, where a combination of sand and soil and organisms filter out the waste gradually over a period of time, and that's somewhere on the property. Now, those are the most common wastewater treatment options here in Canada. There are some other options. If you have a cottage somewhere up north or in a remote area, you might have a composting toilet, or indeed you might even just have an outhouse, essentially a small building at the back of the property where your waste is simply, you sit on a wooden bench with a hole in it, and your waste is simply deposited into a hole or on the ground where natural processes break it down. In other parts of the world, though, the way that toilet facilities work can be quite different, especially when you think about low-income countries. There are an estimated 2 billion people around the world who lack reliable access to clean toilets with running water. And so what happens to those people when they have to go to the bathroom each day? Well, it depends a lot on local circumstances. In the worst case scenario, there are millions of people around the world at this very moment who are defecating or urinating in the open, out of doors, without shelter, because they have no other options. In some instances, they might, even in the middle of the night, urinate or defecate into plastic shopping bags, and then those get tossed into a ditch somewhere. And that is because that they simply lack access to the infrastructure and the economic means to build the infrastructure that we take for granted here in Canada. And that is the real goal of this lab, is to help us realize just how much we take for granted the ability to go into a private washroom stall, whether it's at work or at school or at home, and do our business in privacy, and be able to dispose of our waste knowing that it leaves the facility and that we don't have to worry about what happens to it next. That is something that North Americans, for the most part, take for granted, but many people in this world do not. So it's a really important thing that we develop some empathy, and that we collectively, as Canadians, make a commitment to trying to help the international community meet its sustainable development goals, particularly with respect to water and sanitation, because it's so vital to public health. It's so vital to people's sense of self-esteem and self-worth and safety, and the ability to lead prosperous, healthy lifestyles. And the reality is that in the COVID world, I think we've become very aware of just how important sanitation and hygiene are. The other thing that's really important from a non-human perspective is the fact that when large amounts of human waste get discharged into the environment without proper treatment, there are consequences for water, for biodiversity, for vegetation, because of that surge of waste into the water. So, for example, if you were to discharge raw sewage into a river or a lake or a stream, what happens typically is that you get a burst of bacterial activity as microorganisms begin to feed on that sewage. Those microorganisms are drawing water oxygen out of the water. And so what happens is other organisms, fish and crabs and shellfish and so on, that need that oxygen in the water start to suffocate because there's not enough oxygen to go around for them and for the bacteria that are feeding on the sewage. So what happens is you very quickly get a die-off of other organisms apart from bacteria. Obviously that water is very unsafe for human consumption. It's unsafe for the consumption by other organisms as well. So there are very real environmental impacts when human waste is just discharged in large volumes into the environment. So for this lab, there's a few things you're going to do. One is that before you meet with your lab instructors, I want you to watch 2 quick videos that are on my learning space that talk about and provide more additional information about the scale of the global challenge with respect to sanitation and wastewater and taking toilets for granted. Then what you're going to do is to read section 10.5 in your textbook, which actually shows you how in a typical Canadian city, how municipal wastewater and sewage is treated to render it safe for discharge into the environment. And then what you're going to do is you're going to meet your lab instructor via Zoom and the other people in your lab section as well. Labs typically have between 20 and 30 students in them. To find out what lab section you are in, go to your Laurier schedule and look for the lab number. It'll be somewhere between section 1 and section 20. And then once you figure what section you're in, then go into the Zoom meetings tab in my learning space and figure out the joining instructions for your lab. And the meeting will take place at the time that is scheduled in your Laurier schedule. So once you've done that, then your lab instructor is going to take you through a few exercises to help you get to know better the other people in your lab section. And we'll also do some exercises to help you better understand the challenges related to wastewater and to start to visualize some of the activities that you need to do for your lab assignment. And when you leave the Zoom meeting, you should have a very clear idea of the expectations and the instructions for the lab assignment, which I hope you will have read before you meet with your lab instructors so that you have a better idea of what's going on. So make sure that after you watch this video, you go straight to your lab assignment instructions in my learning space and read those and work your way through those 2 videos that I mentioned. What you will see that your assignment entails is one of 2 things. If you live in a rural area, what you need to do is to figure out how your household wastewater treatment system works, typically how your septic system works. And then what you have to do is to go onto Google Maps or its equivalent, find your house on the satellite image, take an aerial view, and then chart where on your property the septic bed is and mark that on a map. If you live in a city, what you need to do is to go to Google Maps or its equivalent as well and find your house and find the nearest municipal wastewater treatment facility, and then scale the map so that you have both of those on the same frame, and then you need to figure out what is the most likely route of the sewage system, the sewer system, to get from your house to that treatment facility, and then move that into a document. And then what you're going to do is just briefly describe in a paragraph or 2 how the sewage treatment facility works for your household, whether you're rural or urban. Then the next thing you need to do is a little visualization exercise, which is to imagine what would happen if your household did not have access to toilets for a week. And not only did your house not have access to toilets, but none of the neighbors' houses or businesses either. So for a week, you had to go completely without flush toilet facilities. What would happen? What would that be like? How would your family dispose of its wastes? And what would be the implications of not having reliable access to toilets? What would those implications be in terms of your health and your sanitation, your lifestyle, your day-to-day lifestyle, whether it's going to work, going to school, childcare, and so on? How much more difficult would your life become if you were suddenly deprived of a flush toilet facility? And hopefully this will help us generate some empathy for those people in many parts of the world who lack access to clean toilet facilities. So once you've done those exercises, once you've found your map and mapped out where your household wastewater goes, how it's treated in a paragraph describing that, and then a second set of paragraphs about what would happen if you didn't have access to those, combine them into a single document, make it a PDF document, and submit it through the My Learning Space Dropbox for this assignment before your next lab meeting in 2 weeks' time. And what's really important is to do it as a PDF, because a PDF document will open in the viewing window on a computer screen regardless of the software that was used to create the document. The other thing to keep in mind is that all submissions of lab assignments through My Learning Space are screened with plagiarism detection software. I'm sure nobody in this lab or in this course is going to attempt to plagiarize, but please don't. And when we talk about plagiarism, we refer to both copying lab assignments from other students, current students, past, former students who may have done similar activities or similar assignments that have been done at other institutions. The other thing is we check for plagiarism to see whether you've copied and pasted text directly from other sources. So that's, again, something that you want to avoid. If you're unclear about what plagiarism is, ask your lab instructor. There's also resources on My Learning Space accessible through the course syllabus on how to ensure that you do not participate in plagiarism. So anyhow, I hope that this video has given you a good overview of what's expected of you for this lab assignment, and I wish you good luck on it.